Every year you buy seedlings. Every spring you start over. And you might be running the most exhausting garden possible. No permanence, no compounding return. Just an annual cycle of buying, planting, and beginning again. There are vegetables that end that cycle entirely. Plant once, harvest for decades. Some outlive the gardeners who planted them. Number 7 has been feeding the same families for over 100 years. Number 1 is the vegetable commercial agriculture structurally cannot sell you. Let's get into it. Counting down from 20. Number 20, Egyptian walking onion. This is the onion that plants itself, also called the tree onion, also called the topset onion, because instead of going to seed, it grows a cluster of small bulblets at the top of its stalks. Those bulblets get heavy. The stalk bends to the ground. The bulblets root wherever they land. The plant walks across your garden without any help from you. Ancient Egyptian agricultural records describe this exact behavior as a feature, not an accident. Farmers planted a single row and returned the following year to find it had moved, multiplied, and fed an entire household. The walking was the harvest strategy. You can eat every part at every stage. The green tops taste like chives in early spring. The underground bulbs taste like shallots through summer. The topset bulblets are the sharpest, most concentrated onion flavor you will find in any kitchen garden. Allium proliferum survives winter in hardiness zones 3 through 9. It asks for nothing. It multiplies every year without division or replanting. A single planting in the corner of a bed becomes a permanent onion supply that requires only occasional harvesting to stay productive. The vegetable that literally moves toward empty ground and fills it with food. This next one looks like a sculpture, feeds like a tree, and has been kitchen garden infrastructure for over 2,000 years. Number 19, globe artichoke. Most people think artichokes are difficult. They are the opposite of difficult. Sonara scolamus forms a dramatic silver-green architectural plant, reaching 1.5 to 2 meters tall in its first full season. The edible flower buds appear in early summer. If you miss them, they open into enormous violet-purple blooms that are among the most spectacular flowers in any vegetable garden. You do not lose either way. Mediterranean gardeners have grown artichokes as permanent kitchen garden centerpieces for over 2,000 years. Roman cookbooks include artichoke recipes with the casual frequency of something so available it barely needed mentioning. The plant was not a specialty crop. It was infrastructure. Artichokes die back in cold winters and return vigorously from the crown every spring. In mild climates, they are evergreen. Divide the offsets every few years and you compound your planting for free. A single plant becomes 3. 3 becomes 9. One planting produces harvestable buds for 10 to 15 years before the crown needs replacing. The vegetable that looks like a sculpture, blooms like a flower, and feeds like a tree. This next one has been replaced by something far inferior, and almost nobody noticed. Number 18, lovage. Lovage is the forgotten herb that functions like a vegetable, tastes like celery concentrated 10 times, and grows taller than most humans. Levisticum officinale reaches 2 meters in a good growing season. Every part is edible: leaves, stems, seeds, and roots. The flavor is intense, deeply savory, and exactly what is missing from modern supermarket celery, which has been bred down to blandness over decades of industrial agriculture. Medieval European monastery gardens planted lovage as a permanent feature because it provided the celery flavor year after year without the annual effort of growing actual celery, which is one of the most demanding vegetables in cultivation. It dies back to the ground each winter. In spring, the new shoots are among the first edible things in the garden. Early, reliable, and intensely flavored. The stems can be blanched like celery. The leaves go into soups, stews, and stocks where they add a depth that no dried herb matches. The seeds are a spice in their own right. One plant, 2 meters tall, 0 replanting. Permanent harvest from late spring through autumn every year for the rest of your gardening life. This next one is a mistake worth correcting immediately. Most people have never heard of it. Every garden that has it never stops growing it. Number 17, Turkish rocket. Most people have never heard of this plant. That is a mistake worth correcting immediately. Bunias orientalis, a perennial relative of the mustard family that produces tender leaves and flower shoots from early spring through late autumn. Young leaves taste like arugula, but with more complexity. The flower shoots, harvested before they open, taste like a cross between broccoli and mustard greens. Hit subscribe right now if you want more forgotten vegetables like this one, because what follows on this list keeps getting better. The plant was widely grown across Central Asia and Eastern Europe for centuries as a year-round salad and cooking green. It tolerates poor soil, hard frosts, and drought conditions that would kill most annual vegetables. It was abandoned in Western European kitchen gardens when imported annual salad crops became available year-round through trade. The wrong decision. Made for commercial convenience rather than garden productivity, Turkish rockets live for decades, spreads slowly and controllably, provides harvests in early spring before almost any other vegetable is ready, fills the hungry gap, the period between winter stores running out and summer crops coming in, better than almost any plant in temperate cultivation. The salad green that comes back every year before you even remember to buy seeds. Number 16. 9-star perennial broccoli. What if you could plant broccoli once and harvest it for 9 consecutive years? You can. 9-star broccoli produces a large central head surrounded by up to 9 smaller side heads each spring. If you harvest before the flowers open, the plant regenerates year after year. The key is simple. Cut before flowering, feed with compost in autumn, and the crown returns next spring with the same productivity. Most gardeners do not know this plant exists because seed companies make more money selling annual broccoli seed every spring. 9-star broccoli requires 1 purchase, 1 planting, 1 bed space permanently allocated to a productive harvest. The flavor is stronger and nuttier than supermarket broccoli, which is bred for shelf life rather than taste. Fresh cut 9-star broccoli in spring is a completely different vegetable from anything available in retail. The harvest window is late winter to mid-spring, exactly when the garden is otherwise empty and fresh vegetables are most expensive to buy. The broccoli pays back the same bed for nearly a decade. This next one arrives before winter is even finished, without any help from you. Number 15. Sorrel. Sorrel is the vegetable that wakes up before winter is finished. Rumex acetosa pushes new leaves through soil when the ground is still cold, sometimes through the last frost of the year, delivering bright, sharp, lemony flavor at the exact moment when the rest of the garden is still dormant. It is the first fresh thing you can harvest every year without doing anything. French cuisine has relied on sorrel as a permanent kitchen garden staple for centuries. Sorrel soup, sorrel sauce with fish, sorrel folded into cream. The flavor comes from oxalic acid, which gives it the sharp citrus quality that cooks prize for cutting through rich dishes. Grow it in a corner, ignore it, harvest it, ignore it again. It does not need your attention. In poor soil, low light, and inconsistent watering, sorrel outperforms every annual salad green you will plant beside it. The leaves toughen and turn bitter through summer heat. Cut the plant to the ground in July. It returns with fresh, tender growth within 3 weeks. Do this twice, and you extend the harvest from spring through autumn. The is the perennial that arrives before the growing season begins and keeps delivering after it ends. This next one requires 3 years of patience and pays back 40 years of harvest. The mathematics are not complicated. Number 14. Asparagus. Asparagus requires 3 years before the first harvest. Every gardening guide mentions this as a warning. It should be mentioned as a negotiation. You wait 3 years. The plant then produces for 40 years. The mathematics are not complicated. Asparagus crowns planted in well-prepared beds expand outward every season, producing more and more spears as the root mass grows. A bed that produces 20 spears in year 4 produces 60 spears in year 10. The harvest grows larger without any additional planting. Ancient Roman agricultural manuals described asparagus beds as permanent infrastructure equivalent to fruit trees. You prepared the ground with the same investment of time and amendment you would give an orchard, because the return justified it. White asparagus was considered the finest variety in European cuisine for most of recorded history. It is simply green asparagus grown under soil mounds to exclude light. The process of blanching it is centuries old. The flavor difference is significant. Modern gardeners are reluctant to commit 3 years to a bed. That same reasoning produces annual gardens that never improve, never compound, and never reward patience. This vegetable gives you 40 years of harvest in exchange for 3 years of waiting. This next one feeds you from underground while improving the soil above, simultaneously, every year, without fertilizer. Number 13, ground nut, Apios americana. The protein-rich tuber that fed indigenous peoples across eastern North America for thousands of years before European settlers arrived, adopted it enthusiastically for about a century, and then somehow forgot it existed when domesticated potatoes became widely available. The ground nut produces strings of tubers underground, connected like a beaded chain. The flavor is nuttier, denser, and more complex than potato. The protein content is roughly 3 times that of potato, making it one of the most nutritious root vegetables in temperate cultivation. The plant is a nitrogen-fixing legume. While it produces food underground, it improves the soil above. It does both simultaneously, year after year, without fertilizer, without pest problems, and without the blight susceptibility that makes potato growing a constant defensive exercise. Once established, groundnut tubers multiply every year. The harvest grows larger annually without replanting. Leave some tubers in the ground, and the bed regenerates completely. A food source so productive and nutritious that indigenous agricultural systems built around it supported large populations for millennia. Replaced not because anything better was found, but because something more familiar arrived. This next one has been growing in the same corner of Asian kitchens for over 2,000 years. Western gardening replaced it with something that requires starting over every spring. Number 12, Welsh onion. Not Welsh, not an onion in the conventional sense. Allium fistulosum is a perennial bunching onion from Asia that forms expanding clumps of upright hollow leaves with the flavor of spring onion maintained from early spring through late autumn. Chinese agricultural records document continuous cultivation of Welsh onion for over 2,000 years. Japanese cuisine uses it as a foundational ingredient in forms ranging from raw garnish to slow-cooked base. Korean, Vietnamese, and Thai cooking all rely on it in ways that assume constant garden availability. Because in those traditions, constant garden availability was never in question. The plant simply grew. You harvested what you needed. It grew back. Divide the clumps every 2 or 3 years, and you multiply your planting for free. Each division produces a new clump within a single season. A single plant becomes an unlimited supply within a few years. Modern Western gardening replaced it with annual spring onions that require fresh seed every year, careful germination, thinning, watering, and replanting from scratch every spring. The alternative is a clump of onion flavor growing in a corner of your garden that you cut from whenever you need it and ignore the rest of the time. This next one is the kale that became fashionable, just not the right kind. Number 11, perennial kale. Kale became fashionable, the wrong kind. Annual kale varieties are productive in their first year and finish after 1 season. Dobbinton's kale is a branching, shrubby perennial that reaches 1 meter tall and wide. It does not produce a central head. It produces continuous side shoots across the entire plant. Cut a stem, 2 grow back. The more you harvest, the more it produces. Cottagers in Brittany grew Dobbinton's kale as a permanent kitchen garden shrub for centuries, bred for perennial productivity rather than supermarket shelf appearance. The flavor is stronger and more nutritious than annual kale. By the 3rd season, it is producing more leaves than a family can use, from a plant that never needs replanting. The kale that gets bigger, more productive, and more flavorful every year you leave it in the ground. The next one fed European nobility for 1,000 years. Then the potato arrived and was simply forgotten. Number 10, skirret. Most gardeners have never encountered this plant. That alone is a reason to plant it. Sium sissarum, a root vegetable with a cluster of sweet, white, carrot-sized roots around a central core. The flavor is genuinely unique, sweet, slightly spicy, and starchy in a way that sits between parsnip and sweet potato, but belongs to neither category. Skirret was one of the most highly regarded vegetables in European cuisine from the medieval period through the 17th century. Recipes appear in every major English, French, and Dutch cookbook of the period. It was considered a delicacy not a peasant food. Emperor Tiberius reportedly demanded it as tribute from Germanic territories. Then the potato arrived in Europe. Skirret faded from cultivation within a generation. The plant grows as a perennial clump, producing more roots each year. You harvest the largest roots in autumn and leave the smaller ones to continue developing. The clump expands annually. A single planting becomes a permanent root vegetable bed that requires no additional seed or replanting. The vegetable that fed European nobility for 1,000 years, replaced by something that gets blight. The next one is the one that takes over if you let it. That is both the warning and the reason to plant it. Number 9, Jerusalem artichoke. This is the one that takes over if you let it. Helianthus tuberosus produces sunflower-like plants reaching 3 meters in height, topped with cheerful yellow flowers in late autumn when almost everything else has finished. Underground, it produces dense clusters of knobby tubers with a nutty sweet flavor that intensifies after the first frost. The tubers contain inulin rather than starch, which means they have minimal impact on blood sugar and actively feed beneficial gut bacteria. They were used as a food source for diabetics before insulin was isolated, because they provided calories and satisfaction without the glucose spike of starchy vegetables. Plant one tuber, leave even a fragment in the ground at harvest. The bed regenerates completely the following year. This is the feature and the warning simultaneously. Indigenous peoples across North America cultivated Jerusalem artichoke as a staple crop for centuries before European contact. French explorer Samuel de Champlain found it growing in cultivated gardens in Massachusetts in 1605 and sent it to France, where it became a significant food crop within decades. This 3-meter flowering plant that produces a sweet, gut-healthy, frost-improved tuber from ground that needs nothing every single year. The next one has been described as the finest tasting vegetable in English kitchen garden tradition. Most gardeners have never heard of it. Almost none have tasted it. Number 8, sea kale. Crombe maritima, a coastal perennial that produces blanched white shoots in early spring, harvested before they reach the light, with a flavor described consistently as the finest tasting vegetable in English kitchen garden tradition. Forcing sea kale was a kitchen garden obsession among English estate gardeners from the 17th century onward. Ceramic forcing pots were placed over the crowns in late winter to exclude light, producing pale, tender, sweet shoots that could be harvested like asparagus spears. The forcing pot itself became a cottage garden design element. The plant grows from a permanent woody crown that expands and deepens every year. Once the crown is large enough, it can be forced repeatedly without weakening it. Old accounts describe sea kale crowns over 30 years old, still producing excellent harvests. It tolerates salt, coastal exposure, poor sandy soil, and conditions that defeat conventional vegetables. It evolved on shingle beaches in exactly those conditions. Most gardeners have never tasted fresh forced sea kale. The flavor is mild enough for the most reluctant vegetable eaters and complex enough to satisfy the most serious cooks. It is the asparagus of the sea cliff, patient, permanent, and unlike anything sold in a supermarket. The next one has been growing in the same locations without cultivation, without replanting, for an indeterminate number of centuries. It may be pre-Roman. Number 7, perennial leek. The perennial leek does something annual leeks cannot. It multiplies itself in 2 directions simultaneously. Babington's leek produces underground offsets that expand the original clump and aerial bulbils at the top of its flowering stem that drop, root, and start new plants. The flavor is stronger than annual leek. The green tops function as chives throughout the growing season. The bulbils add a tiny garlic-forward punch to any dish. This plant has been growing on the coastal cliffs of Cornwall and Ireland without human attention for so long that its original introduction is undocumented. It may be pre-Roman. What is known is that it has been growing in the same locations, without cultivation, without replanting, for an indeterminate number of centuries. It has been feeding the same families for over 100 years in documented cases, more in others. A leek that plants itself, multiplies itself, and will likely outlive every annual vegetable in your garden by several generations. The next one was rediscovered after over a century of near total obscurity, and it climbs. Number 6, Caucasian spinach. Hoblitzia tamnoides, rediscovered by Scandinavian permaculture gardeners in the early 2000s after over a century of near-total obscurity. A climbing perennial from the Caucasus Mountains, producing spinach-flavored leaves on vigorous vines reaching 3 to 4 meters. The flavor of young leaves is mild and rich, without the bitterness that develops in annual spinach when temperatures rise. By the time heat ruins annual spinach crops, Caucasian spinach is producing its best growth. It dies back each autumn and returns from the rootstock each spring. A plant in the ground for 5 years produces more leaf growth in a single season than most gardeners can use. Norwegian gardener Per Lindegard is largely responsible for reintroducing it, finding it growing wild, and passing it through the permaculture network for 20 years before any commercial nursery carried it. The spinach that climbs, multiplies, and keeps coming back until you tell it to stop. The next one grows in the dark, in the exact spot where food production is normally considered impossible. Number 5. Ostrich fern, Matucha struthiopteris, the source of fiddleheads, and one of the most overlooked food plants available to temperate gardeners. In early spring, before the fronds fully unfurl, the tightly coiled emerging shoots are harvested and eaten as one of the most prized seasonal vegetables in North American and Japanese cuisine. Nutty, grassy, and faintly mineral in a way no cultivated vegetable replicates. The window is 2 to 3 weeks. The flavor is exceptional. The plant forms expanding crowns in moist shade, exactly the conditions where food production is normally considered impossible. Abenaki, Maliseet, and Mi'kmaq peoples harvested fiddleheads as a spring staple at the end of winter provisions for generations. Divide the crown periodically, and you increase your harvest indefinitely. A shaded corner currently producing nothing becomes a luxury spring vegetable permanently. The edible plant that grows in the dark asks for nothing and returns every spring with one of the finest things you can put on a plate. The next one was so useful, so universally grown, so completely taken for granted that it was named after good things in general. Then it disappeared entirely. Number 4. Good King Henry. The name tells you everything about what was once common knowledge. Blightum bonus henricus was so universally grown, so completely assumed to be a standard feature of any productive garden, that it was named after good things in general. It was not remarkable. It was just there, in every garden, feeding every family. Young leaves eaten like spinach, young shoots blanched in spring like asparagus, flower buds eaten like broccoli. 3 different harvests in different forms from one plant across a single growing season. It disappeared almost entirely when annual vegetables became widely available. Something that had fed households reliably for centuries was quietly abandoned because it was too ordinary to market. This plant grows in poor, dry soil where annual spinach would not germinate. The vegetable that was so useful, it became invisible. And then, though invisible, it was forgotten. The next one is treated like truffle season by restaurants that carry it. The wild supply is running out, but you can grow it permanently in the one spot in your garden where nothing else will. Number 3. Ramps, Allium tricoccum, wild leek, the most anticipated spring vegetable in North American woodland foraging, and one of the few permanent food sources available for deep shade under mature deciduous trees. Restaurants that feature ramps treat them the way others treat truffle season. The window is short, the flavor is irreplaceable, and wild supply is increasingly unreliable as foraging pressure intensifies on natural colonies. You can grow them, and here is what most people misunderstand. Ramps are slow to establish, but fast to multiply once they are. A small planting in moist, rich, leafy soil under mature deciduous trees triples in area within 5 to 7 years. A decade in, a small initial planting becomes a self-sustaining, expanding colony, producing more than any household can harvest. Permanent, compounding, in the exact spot where nothing else will grow. The next one is the most architecturally dramatic edible plant available to any temperate gardener. 3 meters tall, leaves 1 meter across, and it lives for decades. Number 2. Turkish giant, rhubarb, Rheum palmatum, not the rhubarb you know. Leaves reach 1 meter across on stems 2 meters tall. Flower stalks reach 3 meters. It is the most architecturally dramatic edible plant available to temperate gardeners. The young stems are used exactly as garden rhubarb, but the flavor is sharper and more intensely tart. The enormous leaves serve as a canopy for beneficial insects and a moisture-retaining mulch when they die back in autumn. The plant lives for decades. Division every 5 to 7 years is the only maintenance required, and each division becomes a fully productive new plant within 2 seasons. Once you see Turkish giant rhubarb in full midsummer growth, the division between ornamental and productive gardening collapses entirely. This plant is both, simultaneously, permanently. The last one is not famous, has never been featured in a trend piece, and is the only vegetable on this list that commercial agriculture structurally cannot sell you. And number 1, tree collards. The best perennial vegetable on this list is not famous. It has not been rediscovered by a chef or featured in a trend piece. It has been quietly feeding families on the Pacific coast of North America and in West African growing traditions for generations, completely ignored by mainstream gardening culture. Brassica oleracea variety ramosa. Purple tree collards grow as a woody perennial shrub, reaching 2 to 3 meters. The leaves are harvested year-round in mild climates. In cold winters, production continues until the first hard freeze and returns from the base in spring. The flavor improves with cold. Midwinter harvests from a mature plant produce leaves significantly richer and more complex than anything the plant offers in summer. It does not produce reliably from seed. It propagates only by cuttings, passed from gardener to gardener, wrapped in damp newspaper, shared over fences, and through community networks. This is the vegetable that commercial agriculture structurally cannot sell you. It requires no annual seed purchase. It grows too large for standard nursery containers. It propagates too slowly for wholesale supply chains to scale. Every property of the plant that makes it valuable to a gardener makes it commercially inconvenient. A perennial brassica that produces through winter, improves with cold, grows to the size of a small tree, and can only reach you through another person who already knows about it. That is what number 1 looks like. Not the most famous, the most quietly powerful. 20 vegetables, 20 permanent harvests. Every difficult bed on your property has an answer somewhere on this list. Slopes, shade, dry strips, wet corners. The space under the old tree where nothing annual ever survives. The idea that a vegetable garden requires starting over is recent. Before annuals dominated retail seed culture, every productive kitchen garden was anchored by permanent plants that returned, expanded, and deepened every year. Those plants did not disappear. They were simply edged out by a system built to sell you seeds every season. If this changed how you think about your garden, click the video on your left right now. Because in that one, we look at complete perennial food systems that feed families for generations from a single act of planting, producing more with every passing year instead of demanding more from you. Subscribe to Plantelligence and stop starting over when something better never needs to stop.